Welcome to Xi Jinping Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Beijing's mixed messages leave businesses questioning investments in China. Xi highlights importance of innovation in Chinese-style modernization. As Chinese tourists stay home, Hong Kong must embrace them more. Will China's elite ever rise up? US warns of Chinese disinformation. China says that's disinformation. Beijing's mixed messages leave businesses questioning investments in China. The Guardian. Confidence in doing business in China is waning due to a renewed focus on national security and rising geopolitical tensions. A survey by the American Chamber of Commerce found that a record low of 52% of companies were optimistic about the next 5 years. The European Chamber also highlighted Beijing's mixed messaging as eroding confidence. The case of Syngenta, which has still not listed on Shanghai's Star Market 2 years after filing for $10 billion IPO, is cited as an example of the growing difficulties faced by businesses in China. Xi highlights importance of innovation in Chinese-style modernization. South China Morning Post. Chinese President Xi Jinping has stated that innovation and strategic planning are vital for China's modernization and to transform the country into a superpower. In a speech to senior officials, he emphasized the need for coordination between development and security and called for innovation to be given a prominent position in national development. The speech was delivered in February but has only recently been published, and comes at a time when China is seeking to revive its economy while dealing with complex geopolitical challenges. As Chinese tourists stay home, Hong Kong must embrace them more. South China Morning Post. Hong Kong is seeing a revival in tourism, with 2023 visitor numbers expected to reach levels similar to those in 2018, when tourism accounted for 3.6% of GDP and 230,000 jobs. However, the types of Chinese tourists have changed due to economic and geopolitical factors, with a rising preference for domestic holidays and a surge in adventure and sports tourism. Red tourism, rural tourism, and visits to theme parks have also seen significant growth, according to a report by the Chung Kong Graduate School of Business. Will China's elite ever rise up? Foreign policy. The article discusses the growing opposition to Chinese President Xi Jinping among China's elite and explores the reasons behind this opposition. The author highlights the fact that Xi has managed to anger a significant portion of the elite without facing any revolt. The article also touches on the inner workings of China's elite and their culture of fear. It concludes by examining the potential threat that the elite pose to Xi's power. US warns of Chinese disinformation. China says that's disinformation. CNN. China has accused the US of spreading disinformation through a report by the State Department that claimed the Chinese government was spreading disinformation. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs called the report propaganda and infiltration and a source of disinformation. The U.S. report had accused China of spending billions of dollars a year on foreign information manipulation and said that Chinese leader Xi Jinping had significantly expanded efforts to shape the global information environment. Russia and China's super weapons and the threat of nuclear war. Telegraph. The world is entering a new era of nuclear weapons, with the end of the Cold War and years of disarmament coming to an abrupt end. Russia has suspended participation in the New START weapons treaty, while China is rapidly increasing its nuclear arsenal. This means that there will soon be 3 nuclear superpowers, making the geopolitics of nuclear weapons even more complicated. There are concerns about proliferation, with fears that countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia may seek nuclear capabilities. However, it's important to note that weapons proliferation is not necessarily linked to nuclear power, and most countries with civil nuclear power programs do not have nuclear weapons. The situation regarding the number of nuclear weapons is not as bad as it was during the peak of the Cold War, but there are concerns about the development of new technologies that can outwit ballistic defenses. Russia and China are working on hypersonic warheads that are more difficult to intercept, and China has combined hypersonics with fractional orbital bombardment. The US and its Western allies should focus on submarines, which are harder to locate and eliminate than land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. The US should drop its ICBMs and invest in practical defenses that can stop various kinds of missiles in non-nuclear scenarios. While there are concerns about the doomsday clock ticking closer to midnight, it's important to scrutinize this idea and consider the role that nuclear weapons can play in preventing catastrophic events like major asteroid impacts. Indonesia to launch Southeast Asia's first bullet train. CNN. Indonesia has launched its first ever bullet train, a high-speed rail line connecting Jakarta and Bandung in West Java. The $7.3 billion project, part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, is largely funded by Chinese state-owned firms. The 86-mile line, named Whoosh, is electric and has no direct carbon emissions. It will travel at approximately 217 miles per hour, reducing travel time between the two cities from 3 hours to under an hour. Plans are being discussed to extend the line to Surabaya. To protect nations' feelings, Beijing poised to regulate what people can wear. The Sydney Morning Herald. A new law being proposed in China could make it illegal to wear clothes that undermine the spirit or hurt the feelings of the Chinese nation. The draft law, which has been met with widespread opposition, threatens fines of up to 5,000 yuan, $1,000, and 15 days in detention. Critics argue that the law is vague and could lead to selective enforcement of administrative power. They also claim that it will burden courts with unnecessary enforcement and increase conflict between the police and the public. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 dimensions. Today, we have quite an interesting mix of news from China. Let's dive right in. First up, confidence in doing business in China seems to be wavering due to concerns over national security and rising geopolitical tensions. The mixed messaging from Beijing has eroded confidence, with a record low of 52% of companies feeling optimistic about the next 5 years. This is definitely something that businesses are questioning when it comes to investing in China. On the flip side, Chinese President Xi Jinping is highlighting the importance of innovation in China's modernization efforts. He emphasizes the need for coordination between development and security, and calls for innovation to have a prominent position in national development. It's interesting to see how China is trying to balance economic revival with complex geopolitical challenges. Speaking of economic revival, Hong Kong is seeing a revival in tourism. However, the types of Chinese tourists have changed due to economic and geopolitical factors. There is a rising preference for domestic holidays and a surge in adventure and sports tourism. Red tourism, rural tourism, and visits to theme parks have also seen significant growth. So, Hong Kong needs to embrace these changing trends to make the most of this tourism revival. Now, here's an intriguing article that explores the growing opposition to President Xi Jinping among China's elite. Surprisingly, despite angering a significant portion of the elite, Xi hasn't faced any revolt. The article delves into the inner workings of China's elite and their culture of fear. It's definitely worth a read to understand the potential threat that the elite pose to Xi's power. Moving on to international relations, the US warns of Chinese disinformation, but China says that's disinformation. It's a bit of a he said she said situation. The US report accused China of spreading disinformation, while China called it propaganda. It's interesting to see how these narratives clash in the world of information warfare. Now, let's talk about something that might make you a bit uneasy: the threat of nuclear war. Russia and China are rapidly developing new super weapons, and this is changing the geopolitics of nuclear weapons. There are concerns about proliferation, especially with countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia potentially seeking nuclear capabilities. However, it's important to note that weapons proliferation is not necessarily linked to nuclear power. The situation is complex, but one thing remains clear: the world needs to focus on practical defenses and non-nuclear scenarios to ensure our safety. On a brighter note, Indonesia is set to launch Southeast Asia's first bullet train. This high-speed rail line connecting Jakarta and Bandung is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative and is largely funded by Chinese state-owned firms. The line, named Whoosh, will reduce travel time between the two cities from 3 hours to under an hour. It's exciting to see the development of infrastructure in the region. Lastly, a new law being proposed in China could regulate what people can wear in order to protect the nation's feelings. This has sparked widespread opposition, with critics arguing that the law is vague and could lead to selective enforcement. It's important to strike a balance between protecting national sentiments and preserving individual freedoms. That's all for today's news roundup. I hope you found it informative and entertaining. Now, it's your turn to join the discussion. What are your thoughts on these news stories? Do you have any questions? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6-do brief via email.